Well, good morning. We'll now resume this public hearing of the committee's inquiry into the opportunities to improve mental health outcomes for Queenslanders. The committee has taken a trauma-informed approach to public hearings, where it is hearing from people about their lived experience of mental ill health in a personal capacity. There is a qualified psychologist available to you today, should today's hearings raise any issues for you. Please see the Secretariat if you'd like to engage your support. Alternatively, I'd encourage you to seek support through your own network should you need to. Before I welcome the first in the last group of witnesses we have today, I just wanted to say this will be our last formal hearing anticipated at this stage, and we attempted to start the process with hearings from people with lived experience, and to that end we went to Stepping Stone Clubhouse and heard from a range of people with lived experience. We're now finishing. In addition, we've heard along the way from many people with lived experience and lived experience practitioners, and we're now finishing our formal inquiry hearings by hearing from people with lived experience. I think it hopefully gives an indication to the community that the value that the committee places on the experiences of people with lived experiences of mental health issues, alcohol and other drug issues, and suicidality. With that, I'd like to welcome Ms. Laura Lewis. Welcome to the committee. Please,
is that close enough?
Yeah, absolutely. Please feel free to make an opening statement, and then we'll go to the committee for questions.
Okay, thank you. Can my husband just place a painting at the front there for you to? It's a visual tool for me.
Sure.
It's my art too. I haven't plagiarised. Does it sit there? Yeah. In the spirit of reconciliation, I acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. Paying my respect to elders past and present and extending that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. I would also like to acknowledge people with the lived experience of mental illness whose stories must be heard. I would like to thank the Mental Health Select Committee for your work and extending an invitation, offering me this opportunity to speak. I'd also like to add an additional thank you to my state member, Joan Peace, who encouraged me to email you. So this is a painting I completed in the previous week, and it was to help me write this. I used my creative processes to write this. To create the painting, I used twine, which is glued on the board to form the shape of a tree trunk growing into one of the many branches that form a tree. The twine, made from individual strands represents people who fulfil roles in our communities: educators, politicians, PNCs, sporting organisations, media, and groups that represent families. This vital diversity that together strengthens and forms the tree trunk. The trunk is community, and the branches represent both diversity and intersectionality. A tree can't exist without branches, but they are all different. Some branches are healthy, with an abundance of life flourishing on them. Some may have birds' nests, possums, insects that are part of the ecosystem. Some may not have nests or possums, but they are vital to the tree as they are veteran branches with many offshoots. Some branches are twisted and scarred, but fulfill their role in helping collect sunshine and hydrate the budding young shoots in the very upper canopy. Every branch is vital to the health of this tree, this community. On this branch in my art, you will see a bird's nest made from used and blackened matches. That kind of depicts trauma, I guess. It has holes and twigs missing, signifying gaps and barriers felt by parents with a mental illness. Inside the nest are two perfect eggs, and they are gold. They represent hopes, dreams. They include which include meaningful work, travel, friends, and lifestyle, because not all people with a mental illness have children. For me, the eggs represent my 2 children, and they sit unattended because as a parent with mental illness, I'm caught in a cycle of tending to the nest or systems, which distracts me from protecting my eggs and exhausts me and makes me unwell. If the eggs hatch, they will also be vulnerable and easy prey. The tree trunk and its branch supports the nest but provide no scaffolding or physical, emotional support to my family, and we sometimes feel quite isolated. There is a faint gold canopy that not quite reaches over the nest. This canopy provides shade to community that wants to understand mental illness, community that are not intentionally cruel, but are scared of the stigma that exists and choose to avoid awkward discussions. So the nest with a mentally ill parent never quite enjoys the shelter of the canopy or the community. My first exposure to mental illness was when I was diagnosed with postnatal depression. My firstborn was 6 months old, and we were living in Mackay, and I felt something was off and felt incredibly guilty that my perfect baby was not making me happy, or, I was feeling feelings I didn't understand. And I actually flew back to Brisbane to see a GP who I'd been seeing for years because I trusted him. And seeing him once, just one appointment, all I received was a prescription for an antidepressant. He didn't discuss with me any kind of options that could include mindfulness or seeing a psychologist. And I didn't know at the time that should have been a suggestion or a conversation that was held. So we rely on our GPs, no matter what kind of conditions we have, to be a good resource for many things impacting our health. Wondering if the catastrophic breakdown I experienced 9 years later could have been avoided is something I do a lot. And of course, I have no way of knowing if this is true. A lot of my treatment I experienced from 2011, I can't discuss in a public hearing without the protection of privacy and confidentiality. It's impossible to provide feedback to institutions who represent shareholders over my own interests. My diagnosis of depression in 2011 was a misdiagnosis. This misdiagnosis led to me being told the only treatment available was electroconvulsive therapy. It's invasive, traumatic, and left me with an acquired brain injury. I have a short-term memory impairment that is still denied by my then treating clinician, and I never had this debilitating condition prior to ECT. I received a diagnosis of autism and ADHD at 50, which was liberating and painful due to examining many historical events in my life. Those aha moments are bittersweet. And as someone who has now been involved in much advocacy over the years, I've learned to speak up for myself. Yet it's very difficult to receive person-centered care because the imbalance of power with our clinicians is incredibly unfair, and our diagnoses are used against us. So my career as an unpaid advocate, I have spoken in Parliament House, Canberra. I have given testimony to the Senate Select Committee on Autism. I've stood on the TEDx Brisbane stage and provided a 1-minute pitch and presented countless attended and spoke at countless events around mental illness, autism, disability, and inclusion. So despite these achievements, my treating clinicians ignore my requests to use acceptance and commitment therapy. And this makes me feel unheard, disempowered, disrespected, and that I'm inadequate too inadequate to be involved in decisions about my personal choice around my treatment. I'd like to see a far less pathologised approach used with treating people with mental illness. I'd like to see more people living with a mental illness speaking at events that target us, yet usually talk at us. I'd like to see our child youth mental health services accept children as clients. Now, I can say that I have been a previous parent carer member of the advisory group for Kim's as well some time ago, and I acknowledge that they do good work and they are stretched with their budgets, but autistic children have mental health conditions. I'd like to see the funding allocated to Headspace improve so that their staff retention improves. I hear great things about Headspace, but the frequent issue I hear from people in the autism field mostly is the high staff turnover, which is problematic for autistic young adults. They need continual routine and, the same. I'd like to see mental health nurses working in hospitals receive trauma-informed training because they talk to us like we're children. So I'd like to also talk about NDIS. I have a 20-year-old disabled son. He has a support coordinator and a plan and is plan managed, and yet my involvement in his very adult life and navigating NDIS is essential. My own disability ensures my ability to effectively do this for my son is compromised. I've had 2 hospital admissions just due to stress induced by the scheme intended to support my family member. This failing has meant I have also yet to access the NDIS myself. In 2011, I had 7 admissions, and that was a combined total of 163 nights away from my young family. I continued to have admissions past 2011, but they were less frequent, and I attended day programs, working hard on building a toolkit of resources. The very best learning was my own realisation last year that I have survived 100% of my difficult times. I have learned to allow myself to sit in discomfort, knowing I will get through it. We pathologise negative feelings. We're medicated to avoid negative feelings. We're taught CBT to challenge negative feelings. My lived experience realisation of understanding that negative feelings, while painful, are survivable has been far more helpful than 11 years of many different treatments. So we've come a long way. It has to be acknowledged. My great aunt lived in an asylum back in Victoria and endured shock treatment with no anaesthetic. But we still have so much to learn and implement. I recently attended a symposium with a vast number of people with lived experience in the audience. And again, we were talked at. We weren't included. We weren't standing on the stage. There were some people standing on the stage, but they represented NGOs and they held high positions, which I can't say because it might identify them. So we need independent people also standing on that stage, telling our story of lived experience, storytelling, and being a part of co-design of any implementations that are being considered. I feel rage and sadness. I feel scared of a relapse and will avoid a hospital admission at all costs. I do not feel heard. I have not seen my psychiatrist since October last year. I'm heavily involved in a wonderful initiative which is based in Queensland but is Australia-wide, and it's funded by the Department of Services. It's called the Finding North Network. This network is exclusively for people living with a mental illness. So this network brings us all together with many different lived experiences and beliefs, and yet we all get along really well. I am not my mental illness. I am not disordered. The only mad thing about me is the anger, which drives me to talk openly and an attempt to improve systems. Thank you for listening.
You mentioned that there were things that you didn't want to share in a public hearing. We can go into a private session if there is further information you want to share with the committee, and that would stay confidential to the committee only.
Yes, I would need time to prepare though, because I didn't put it into writing at all.
Okay, all right.
That's entirely up to the life cycle of this committee, I guess.
Yeah. In that instance, I might go to the member for Palmerston for a question.
Thank you very much for coming in. Thank you for what has very evidently been a long career of advocacy and speaking up for people with mental ill health. I've got a couple of questions coming out of the things that you've spoken about so far. You talked about your desire to embark on acceptance and commitment therapy and how that's not being supported by your treating teams. Mm-hmm. Would you feel comfortable telling us any more about that? You know, what's meant to be a person-centred treatment?
Yeah, so I'm very attuned because I've done so many day programs of different therapies, and the minute CBT techniques are brought into therapy, I say I don't like CBT. It's really not helpful for me. And they just say, well, they dismiss my own preferences. I've said that since learning of my autism, and I'm familiar with autism because my son is autistic and he's 20. So I've been an advocate for him and his rights his whole life. And so I know a neurodivergent brain will respond differently. Not everyone's neurodivergent brain, but mine. And I had also had a fabulous mental health nurse. I don't even know if the program still runs, but it was a home visiting nurse. And she visited me weekly, fortnightly for several years. And she used acceptance and commitment therapy, which is how I first came to understand it. And I really flourished under her care. And I was devastated when she retired. She couldn't clone herself.
Selfish.
I know.
Could you maybe explain, for my benefit at least, what is acceptance and commitment therapy? I've heard about it, but I don't know a great deal about it.
Yeah,
I'd love to hear your take on why it's useful for you and your neurodivergent mind.
Well, I've read the book by, I think his name's Russell Harris, The Happiness Trap. And my takeaways from that was about being present and living just in the moment and recognizing that in this moment I might feel really bad, but it doesn't mean that is permanent, and that my next moment I might feel different, or the next day when I wake up. And so I really spent a lot of time last year after I decided I could no longer see my psychiatrist. And again, that's stuff I can't talk about here. But I reflected about, what did I want to achieve and what was really hard about my mental illness. And most of it was discomfort. And I think it's like the same as when you have a baby. You're terrified at first, and then the second you're not going to die. So, usually. So it's just like I welcomed that discomfort into my life. It was not invited, but I learned to understand that it's a part of the whole gamut of emotions that humans must experience.
Thank you. May I have a follow-up?
Yeah, sure.
Please,
of course.
if that's all right. We've heard a lot through this committee about lived experience mental health peer workers. And it strikes me that your your own work and experience in a voluntary capacity may at times have encountered upon that space, I suppose. Have you worked with any mental health peer workers through the course of your experiences with the mental health system? Do you have any comments to make about it?
I actually didn't know there was mental health peer workers available to me. It's never been brought up. Until funnily I was talking to someone very early this morning who lives in Canberra and says that they are available both through NDIS and outside of NDIS. But I'd like to also say that as a person who is a lay person, I haven't done any training, and I make that very, very clear to anyone I talk to, whether they're a friend or when I'm speaking, that my advice is not professional. That, I have taken on a role of almost being an informal peer worker with people who I know with mental health crises, because I never will ignore a call for help. I will always reach out.
Thank you.
Go to the member for South Brisbane.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for joining us today. I wanted to ask about your late life diagnosis of autism and ADHD. My office has been receiving a handful of queries from people about the cost and the time. I wonder if you could just share that experience.
Yeah, it's a pretty deflating experience. I think the wait lists are really long. The costs are prohibitive. So I pretty much got a diagnosis from my psychiatrist, but refused to go through the actual testings that I would need to access NDIS, because I find the concept of talking about deficits about myself incredibly traumatic, because for 50 years leading up to knowing I was autistic, I was a living, breathing deficit. At school, I didn't fit in. I didn't belong. I said the wrong things. I misunderstood. I recently read all my yearbooks from high school, and I was never a popular kid at school, but I always thought that I was friends with everyone. And I read some comments and they weren't actually nice. And it's completely different to my memory of high school. And I was like, oh, wow, that's a bit confronting. And I think just threw them in the bin, because I just thought, it's proving that I always felt different. I knew I was different. And sometimes I have to say my coping mechanism was I must be special, like particularly when I was a very young child. I feel different, I must be special, because otherwise it was I feel different, I must be broken. And I did feel both. So it's incredibly difficult to access as an adult. It's very expensive. We also don't have enough, people in the mental health industry. I think it's only psychiatrists in Queensland who can diagnose adults. So I don't think there's enough awareness and understanding. I had to say to my psychiatrist, can you please go away and read about the prevalence of late diagnoses of autism and ADHD in women? And to his credit, he did do that. And I really appreciate that he did that.
Thank you. And a follow-up, Chair, if I may. You mentioned before institutions that are beholden to stakeholders over individual care. And I think you're talking about private healthcare institutions. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
They call us consumers. And with 11 years of admissions, which dwindled, like the frequency slowed down and dwindled across the 11 years span. I can't quantify it right now, but I can tell you that there's been cost cutting, and the ownership of the hospital, I think, has changed a couple of times, and it's foreignly owned. And I just find that there's a lot of conflict when it comes to the care of a very vulnerable person. and also the need to provide, like the CEO answers to the board, who answers to the shareholders, and that's just a quandary.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Just going back to your yearbook thing, I think everybody on this side of the table would say to you, don't read the comments. Never read the comments. I wanted to ask you about this Finding North network.
Yep.
I've just been looking it up. It seems to be run by the Mental Illness Fellowship, which
Yes, MIFA.
MIFA, which have given evidence to the committee. Could you just tell us about a little bit more about that network and how it helps you?
So the network has an app where we can all access and interact with each other. There's groups, like I'm in a Mad Pride group. They're going to be, it's still under development, but they're going to be adding extra features where you can upload articles of interest and things like that. I find that they post a lot of opportunities to apply for work within mental health sector as lived experience people and attend events. They one of the highlights for me, because I'm an independent advocate and I won't work for an NGO. Because the moment you work for an NGO, you have a conflict with where you get your government funding from. You can't really criticise it openly. So I was invited to present be a part of a presentation to Department of Services, and we had 47 Department of Services staff like dial in to the Zoom or Teams meeting. And in my wildest dreams of advocacy, getting FaceTime with one influential person of a CEO or a politician or, anyone who can help or listen or be part of change is really hard. You got to work really hard to get it, and usually you don't. And I had 47 people listen to me and give, I was highly recommending Finding North Network. But I also was very aware that they can take that funding away at any time. I didn't give anything false. I didn't say anything because I wanted them to see them continue receiving the funding, but just that opportunity to speak in front of 47 people from the grants section of Department of Services was cool, and it helps with your confidence too. So these opportunities Finding North give you help you understand and realise that what you have to say is worth saying, worth hearing. And, like we have members who have very firm faith-based beliefs around their recovery. And we have people who like to use the word recovery, and I don't like to use the word recovery. And we all just talk about it in a way that is very respectful, and we learn from each other on how it works for them and why they like that. And it's moderated really well, and the project leads are very good as well.
Look, unfortunately, we've run out of time. I do want to thank you for taking the time to come in here and for showing us your beautiful artwork and explaining the significance of that to us. The evidence and the stories that you've shared with us today will certainly inform the committee's work as we go forward.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for coming in today.
Thanks.
Chair, if I could just add.
Yes.
Can I just say thank you? I just absolutely love your painting.
Oh, thank you.
Blown away by the story and
Thank you.
in fact, I slipped a note over and said we should sort of, capture an image of it somehow. And
You're welcome to take a photo of it, and I'm happy to supply a text of just the process of painting it and what was going through my mind. So that's fine. I'm going to be entering it in the Mental Health Awareness Month, which is in October's Recovering Futures Art Exhibition. And if it's chosen, it will be exhibited at City Hall.
Excellent.
thinking we should exhibit it here at Parliament somewhere. But
You're very welcome to do that too.
I'll have to take that up with the clerk and the
Yes.
speaker.
Well, I was talking about putting it out in front of Pro Hearts painting out there.
There you go. Thank you very much. We're
Thank
going
you.
to go to somebody who is online.